The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap. On today's episode, Trident Room host Michael Gannon sits down and has a conversation with change advocate and Marine Sherman Neal II.
Today I have with me Sherman Neal, a lawyer, former Marine Corps logistics officer, and now he's working at Murray State University all the way out in southwest Kentucky. Now, Sherman, you've gotten some recent attention, and on March 30th, you were a keynote speaker for the Murray State University Rather West Kentucky Museum exhibit, Voices and Votes, Democracy in America, based on the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History exhibition called American Democracy, A Great Leap of Faith.
Appreciate that, Captain Gannon.
So, Sherman, your history with the law started far earlier than college, and in your keynote address, you told a story of when you were a third grader and decided to address your habeas corpus rights with the school. And to be honest, I don't think many third graders can spell the word Constitution or habeas corpus, let alone even know what it means. Could you go ahead and just tell the full story of what happened back in third grade?
This is a true story, and I didn't quite go to concern with my concerns to them. I wrote them out and tried to jump a level over, which is apparently a theme in my life. So I was in detention for who knows what, probably throwing some food or something or fighting somebody in 6th or 7th grade. And while I was in ISS, which is in-school suspension, you pretty much have one of two options. Look at the arms of the clock move and try to, retain sanity until about 3 o'clock, or you can pick up the textbooks that they keep in the classroom back there. So I actually learned a lot about politics and history reading through those. And I took the Emancipation Proclamation and I believe Declaration of Independence and rewrote it to be a Student Freedom Act or some type of Bill of Rights. And my mom discovered that, and she had me take that to our city council in Naperville and had me read that to them to air my grievances against the administration at my school. Probably for something that I actually did, but it was a first practice doing that.
So you rewrote a student bill of rights. How well was that received?
It went well, and I don't recall anybody saying anything negative to me. I believe I just got a thank you and an audience, and they listened. Because 20 whatever it is years later is something that I value now, knowing that they don't have to do that. And it did not prevent me from continuing to be in detention or to change, the rights of students, but it definitely formulated the argument style that I have now in retrospect.
Since you've transitioned from the Marine Corps, I have to ask, how did the Marine Corps prepare you to be a college football coach and take on the status quo in your community?
So two things come to mind right away, and I'll be mad at myself years ago if I was in the Marines for using these generic Marine sayings that all Marines say, but they ring true. Okay, yeah. So the first thing is doing more with less. Every Marine period likes to use that term. You use 10% what the Navy has. That's generally the same case when you're playing football at the FCS level. People hear Murray State, they see it on TV, and they imagine that we must get the same things that University of Kentucky or Alabama or one of those people get, whereas that's definitely not the case. We have to do every job, ranging from sweeping the stadium to, the full spectrum of recruiting to putting together game plans, sometimes all on the same day, whereas that would be divided up amongst larger staffs. So definitely training as a logistics officer and having to know several different fields has come in handy just in dividing up work. The second lesson that I've learned right away through football and then really through this movement that we have going on here is the 70% solution and acting upon it. People generally are adverse to taking any risk. And, every day as a battalion 4 for me was taking risks because the odds of me knowing the technical aspects of, how to repair a certain item or account for a certain ammunition. It just wasn't there. I had to trust the Marines. I had to come up with a plan that they can act upon and just run with it and be ready to adapt. And generally, people are not from not that they're not familiar, but they're not comfortable with that, and they don't take initiative. Whereas with Marines, you don't have that problem, right, wrong, or indifferent, and so that's definitely been an advantage.
So, Sherman, in 1917, the Daughters of the Confederacy erected a statue of General Lee and placed it in front of the local courthouse. Could you elaborate on how you got involved with this statue?
Definitely did not plan on spending the last year fighting the Confederacy again in the form of this statue. The the why behind I drafted a letter which led to an arrest and this movement here is really trying to find a way to uh, get a victory for our players and while showing them the avenues to advocate for change in civic organizations, whether it's local government or state government. To remove that would require two things. One, to teach our players who are the same age as the Marines that many of us lead about how to engage civically, who the players are locally, who they are in the state, and how to expose those people's beliefs and attack them. Then, secondarily, I truly believe that these statues are at where they're at, be it courthouses, other very public locations, or or on military bases, honestly, to to indicate who has superiority, whose voice counts, and whose voice will not count. And these were all put up, in a window where the Ku Klux Klan, working with the UDC, was working to suppress the black vote in the wake of Reconstruction going away. And so in May, well, really dialing back to April, I saw General Berger uh, give the warning order to remove Confederate memorabilia from Marine Corps installations. That's something that I had actually written in on my command and climate surveys for several years because it irritated me to no end. And to see that was amazing to me. The Marine Corps, as y'all know in the audience here, is not usually on the cutting edge of social justice initiatives or dynamics or political correctness, if you want to classify it as that. So that indicated to me how serious the situation had become. And then, two, um, the model for how he is doing it and the justification rang true for what we should have here. And so I decided to craft that letter to use the monument to discuss the very issues that he had brought up, whether it's unit cohesiveness or what we want to be and what we are as a nation. And so rather than go to Chicago and protest with my sister, which was my original plan, I decided to not bypass the issue that was right in front of our face here in Murray.
To refresh everyone's memory, at that time the nation was experiencing substantial civil unrest in the wake of George Floyd's death, among everything else. So, how was your letter received? And I'm not going to put words in your mouth because you're quoted from the New York Times as saying, I am a black male. I am no longer willing to accept state sponsored symbols of institutional racism within my community. You don't mince words about it. You left no room for confusion. What happened next?
With the letter, and specifically to the reference of being a black male, I use that language very carefully. At no point in time did I list my status as a veteran or as a football coach or as an attorney because I didn't think that that was relevant for the discussion we're having at the time. I thought it was important to indicate that my status as a minority in this community um, was the driving factor behind why I decided enough was enough given the events over the 2 months there. So the immediate pushback came from the city, being the mayor, which is the most frustrating type. It's the, well, we can't do anything. We can't eliminate XYZ red tape. So and so has the act. in any reason not to speak to the matter at hand. Um, and what's frustrating about that is, as Marines, we understand that there's two different guiding principles for every order that we give. One, it's the accomplish the mission, and then two, you have to address the morality of what you're doing and why, and being able to articulate that. And you see these government officials in some cases do everything they can not to address the morality of the issue. And that's what we had seen early on. And then from the county officials, we had seen outright resistance and, frankly, um, allyship with these neo Confederate groups, and in some cases, a neo Nazi sympathizer who spoke before the court here in an effort to, I don't like to use the word dog whistle, but because really in an effort to directly empower them to resist any change in the town in the form of that statue moving.
Oh, and that reminds me. So you have the response, unwillingness or avoidance. You have the accept it, move on, and encouragement, and then you have resistance to change. You want to elaborate on the smear ad that got ran on you in the local op-ed or newspaper?
Yes, so the letter, yeah, so the letter came out in June 1st, and eventually the city, and you'll notice a theme here, which is really a theme of the country overall. I'll talk in terms of the city versus the county. The city has the university, the more liberal area, this 30,000 person county, whereas the county is more reflective of your traditional conservative values. So, to address your question, in July there is a decision by the city to remove the Confederate monument. The problem is that the monument sits on about a 5 by 5 meter plot of land that belongs to the county. It sits in the middle of the city. Um, so there's a large protest by people who supported the city's decision against the county at the base of the monument. While I was at the monument during that day, I was handed a 5 page document with an image of me actually in Iraq on it. And the title was something about Liberian terrorists. And basically, the premise was that, I was a sleeper cell operative of Liberia sent here to commit terrorist attacks. So the basis of why Liberia is because my mom is from Liberia. That side of the family is from Liberia. She's a first generation. Well, I'm really a first generation American on her side, and Africa equals bad. One of those blank blank countries, as a previous president had put it. So one, I was impressed actually. I was impressed that they gave me enough credit to say that I could, fake a secret clearance. I could subvert the Marine Corps surveillance mechanisms for 10 years. I could become a lawyer and just be a sleeper cell for 15 years of my life and be able to commit terrorist attacks and choose Murray, Kentucky and their Confederate statue as the place to launch the New World Order. I thought that was pretty insane. But the problem that it's not the letter itself; it's the what happened in the wake of that. So the the document has detailed members of my family, myself, my service, and who I was and what my motives were. Would be laughable if it hadn't been produced by realtors in the town who people knew, who were prominent people. It would be a problem if those realtors uh, hadn't cited a professor from the University of Virginia, changed the words from her studies on monuments to make it fake news, for lack of a better term, that people can take and run with and think that it's credible. And again, it's a microcosm of what's going on nationally, where these people that are prominent people in society put out garbage. People take that garbage and look at the site like the quick 140 character tweet rather than look at the whole citation of of a person's work and run with that to make it credible to support whatever premise they have, which can get them to believe anything, to include that, somehow I'm a terrorist who was able to outsmart the United States government for 10 years just to come terrorize their town, if that makes sense. And really, the choice of picture to use a picture of me in service was the strangest part to me. I would think that you would look for, it probably wouldn't be hard to find a picture of me being 20 years old somewhere on a beach, acting a fool or something. But why choose the picture of me in the desert serving the country as opposed to something like that?
So, Sherman, after hearing that, I'm going to have to dig into your analogy about how this statue in Murray, Kentucky represents a microcosm of what is going on across the country. Everyone listening may not be aware that Secretary of Defense Austin directed that all hands across the Department of Defense conduct a stand down to discuss extremism in the ranks, which is why you and I are talking today. What is going on in your life right now perfectly relates to that conversation. And this conversation is messy, so let's talk about it. If this type of conduct and behavior is happening all across the country, 150 plus years later, and the very citizens that make up this country are also the very same citizens that enlist and commission, what does this collision of what seems to be two diametrically opposed ideas and beliefs mean to readiness as a nation and as a society? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack there. So, in terms of national security, there is a real impact to force readiness, the ability to generate a force, and really the ability to have a diverse force, because diversity is important to make yourself ready, especially in a 2021 environment. The the and I'll give a quick anecdote, just based on one of the questions earlier about using that propaganda in my own intersectionality as a weapon for why you can't serve. Now, there's not many representatives of the Marine Corps that are Black Marine Corps officers in the first place. And then, the few that are out there, especially that have served in the GCE, to come back and have that experience, which I know this is not a unique experience, makes it hard to advocate for anybody to join, especially when, as working in manpower, it's tough in any community to pull those officers, especially in urban communities, let alone here. So the the decision on what we should prioritize in terms of tribalism is the reason I believe that General Berger ended up writing that letter and deciding to ban these symbols outright. Because the tribe that the people subscribe to, who generally follow that flag, which I think we confirmed on January 6th is a negative thing, is incompatible with what we say we are and what we're supposed to support as a unit in the Marine Corps or as a nation. And then if you allow those two incompatible beings, being the Confederacy and what that represents, both in previous times and modern day, and the United States and what we're supposed to be right now, to operate next to each other, one's going to win. And from a straight manpower standpoint, again, we know that a disproportionate amount of the force, especially in the Marine Corps, comes from the South. A disproportionate amount of bases are in the South. So we're asking people, especially if you're someone like me, again, to use myself, to leave Chicago into a force that is already heavily stratified. That force hasn't done anything to address the problem of the symbols that make it clear that you're not welcome until recently last year, and then move to the South, be amongst these people, and expect there to be, peaceful interaction, or expect me to believe that you genuinely want to have a conversation about my thoughts and beliefs. And I think that's what General Austin, General Berger, and really the DOD has signified an understanding of and is working towards correcting. Because again, they've done a great job, in my opinion, of doing that so far.
So Sherman, I'm going to recap what the Department of the Navy is and has done, so bear with me for a second. In the summer of 2020, Navy Task Force 1 was stood up to look into the topics of diversity, inclusion, disproportionate effect of various policies, and this past January, the task force released their report that listed 5 lines of effort, and I'm going to use 2 recommendations as examples real quick. Task Force 1 didn't have a knee-jerk reaction, and for over 6 months they examined the data to make some deliberate course corrections and recommendations. But the Navy and the DoD are behemoth-sized organizations, and they don't exactly turn on dimes. Some things can be done immediately, such as adding respect to the core values, but using artificial intelligence to minimize bias in the selection board process is going to take some time. And the impacts of these changes will not happen overnight. The effect will take time to manifest, and it's going to be a slow process. Ships don't turn on dimes.
I kind of want to disagree with you there a little bit.
All right.
And an example is, so when I was at TBS, if you remember, I said I wanted to be an infantry officer. The facts are that I fell into a lot of stereotypes and couldn't do certain things. I hadn't been familiar with weapons. My first time using a rifle. I wasn't the best at the range. Land navigation from Chicago, generally, if not out in the woods, land nav was tough. Swimming, I was one of the guys that could not pass the swimming test initially, despite having to teach myself how to swim before I got there, and fell into that. Outside of that, all the other qualities I thought I possessed to work on that if I was given time to remediate and do better. And unfortunately didn't get it. So why do I tell that story? It's because I also remember being at TBS during a time when they being the Marine Corps was doing everything and anything that they could to get a woman to pass IOC. So every deficiency that I had, I would see deliberate remediation, opportunities to take the task again, encouragement, bringing in people with similar understandings of how women worked and the issues that they faced to encourage them to get through, not to alter the standards, not to meet a quota, but to present them the best opportunity to have success because they identified diversification as an important goal for the force. And within 6 years at this point in time, they've gone from 0 passing to now wouldn't be in the New York Times. Now we have GC commanders that are women. So literally within 5 years, if you make a pointed effort to correct course, you can do that. And so we would hope to see the same if they are truly invested in what the follow-on action should be based on the conversations we're having with these talks at the highest levels.
Positive reinforcement goes really, really far in taking anything from where it is. Just the vote of confidence, that self-affirmation, that team affirmation, really can carry the day.
That's, and part of a lot of criticism I get is, why pick a statue? Why not pick something more important? And going back to that same time during TBS, I remember when the orders came out to remove sexually provocative pictures from barracks walls, and pilots were getting reprimanded or losing their units for drawing phallic objects in the sky. And I remember actively thinking, it must be nice for somebody to prioritize phallic objects in the sky when every day when I'm on base, I see a flag of an enemy of the United States and nobody says anything about it.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. This episode was recorded April 5th, 2021. For more information about today's guests and topics, please visit the show notes. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/tridentroompodcast.